Welcome to What's the Big Book Actually Saying for Step 3. Now, this is how the Big Book formally describes the step. On page 59, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, and let's just add her, them, it, etc. as well. Now, red cold, that seems like a huge deal. So let's unpack potentially how easy it is for us to make the decision to do what step 3 is suggesting if we've actually done everything else as suggested up to step 3. So let's look at the made a decision bit. Let's look at what page 60 suggests. Our description of the alcoholic, which is the doctor's opinion there is a solution, more about alcoholism. The chapter to the agnostic, we agnostics, and our personal adventures before and after, stopping drinking, make clear 3 pertinent ideas. Now, I should just say that is obviously the founders of AA saying that we, the founders of AA, were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Now, that's just restating step 1 in different words. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, which is restating step 2, or at least part of step 2 in different words. C, that God could and would if he, she, it were sought. Also restating step 2 on page 60. So we're starting to build a bit of a picture. It's only when we accept all 3 of those ideas, A, B and C, that we are ready to make the step 3 decision. And if we're not prepared to accept what step 1 and step 2 are suggesting, why would we take step 3? This is sometimes what we miss in modern AA. All readers, therefore, are encouraged to press pause on the steps if they are not all in on steps 1 and 2. Now, how do we know that's what the Big Book is actually saying? It's this, or at least references like this. This is from page 58. If you have decided you want what we have, which is recovered alcoholics, and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. So that first sentence suggests if you're not all in, you're not ready. Now, I don't know about you, but in contemporary AA, I've seen people pushed into doing the steps while they still are really wrestling with the idea of God. I know people who've been through the steps more than once who still wrestle with the idea of God and wanting to seek God. And yet, if you read what the Big Book is actually saying, it's suggesting if you're not all in on the idea of seeking God, stop. You're not ready. You're not willing to go to any length, fine, we're not judging you, but if you're not ready, you're not ready. Let's read on. At some of these steps, we, which is the current recovered AA members, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. So, what's interesting about that phrase, fearless and thorough, are the 2 adjectives we also use to describe the way we need to take inventory at step 4. We'll get to that, but it's interesting that those words appear here. It suggests that inventory is just around the corner if, in fact, we are willing to take certain steps, that we are willing to go to any length. More will be revealed about step 4 in the next video, but for now, let's look at what this is saying regarding just step 3. The idea of, okay, I'm not all in. I am balking at the idea of doing the rest of these steps, which means I'm not really all in on steps 1 or 2 or both. This easier, softer way can be, well, okay, I'll do the rest of the steps, but I really don't, I'm not all in. I'll half do them. So this idea of making a decision, it's a finite decision, it's a clear decision, it's a willing, committed decision. And, I'm at a point now when I sponsor people, I really do have to ask them, are you all in on the idea of seeking a higher power, motivated by the idea that if you don't, you'll probably pick up a drink and die? Now, that's really, in a nutshell, the motivation that comes out of steps 1 and 2 for any alcoholic who wishes to stop drinking. Some usually say, yeah, no worries, I'm all in. But I really go, well, hang on a second, let's just really think about this, because this all in, to make that decision, to stop acting on self-will and let God run the show for you, that's a huge life-changing emotion, thought, and value displacing proposition. So just accept and understand that people who let God into the driver's seat lead a very different life. I would suggest a better life, but lead a very different life than those who continue to challenge the idea of God, to challenge the idea of letting go. Are you all in? Do you really, really believe that you're an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, that you have an allergy to alcohol, and left untended, your brain will find gaps in logic, gaps in sanity to tell you can have one or two and then stop? Are you really in on that? And are you really all in on the idea that Carl Jung was right, that unless you have a sudden, massive spiritual alteration, and we know these days it doesn't need to be all that sudden, but we need to at least in a sudden way put ourselves on a path to seek God, that a higher power is the only hope you've got. You know, that's what we need to be all in on. Are you all in on that? Are you committed to the idea that this is going to work if you work it? It's a big deal and worth really considering, because I have had the experience myself, and I know other alcoholics in AA who've actually found steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, the ones that look scary when you haven't done them yet. We actually found them quite okay to do because we were all in on the big picture, which is not making an amends to your ex or your boss. It's not writing down what you're afraid of or resentful of and sharing that with another human, your sponsor. It's, that's the small picture stuff. The big picture stuff is a life that is indescribably wonderful, free of the desire to drink. And we know that a higher power is our only shot at getting that. The subsequent steps, therefore, are just work we need to do. Okay, so with all of that having been said, and I hope I didn't waste your time by going on as long as I did, we're starting to build the case that we need to believe that half measures avail us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his, her, their protection and care with complete abandon. Complete abandon, half measures. Being half in, it avails us nothing. This is a turning point. All right, complete abandon, step 3 in other words. We asked a higher power's protection and care with complete abandon. This is what they did, and this is what they're encouraging us to consider doing. Step 3 is not really taken unless we truly desire to start a relationship with a higher power that will make sense to us. Okay, of our understanding. If we still question this approach to recovery, i.e. seeking God on any level, then why bother? That's what we're really talking about at step 3. Let's just say we are all in. Well, what does that look like? What is turning our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him? What's the turning our will and our life over bit really all about? Well, as soon as the book looks at that question, it says this: the first requirement is that we become convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. And what I like about this section, page 60, 61, 62, it doesn't tell us we're bad. It actually says quite a lot, a number of times, you can have fantastic intentions. You can be trying to be a great person. But it's where your motives are coming from. Are they coming from you getting something back or not? Is it about you trying to be in control? Which I think is a very sophisticated thing to think about. And if we look at this idea, okay, self-will, doing things for ourselves, almost always leads us to be in collision with something or somebody. All of a sudden, we're back with the cycle of addiction in the doctor's opinion. If I'm always in collision with something or somebody, surely I'm going to get restless, irritable, discontented, which means unless I can again experience the ease and comfort that comes with taking a few drinks, which is the mental obsession and the insanity. So really, and we learnt this at step 2, the real problem rests in our mind, and our mind is driven by our perceptions and our motives and doing things for us. Anything that triggers restless, irritable, discontented thinking and feeling is a problem for an alcoholic. And self-will creates the opportunity for that problem to exist. It goes on. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Then we skip over a paragraph and get to the point. But what usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. So clearly we're using an analogy here. Not everyone I've taken through the big book responds to analogy. So at times we have to look at what this is actually saying in non-analogous terms. But this is the point we need to actually accept in terms of, let's call it the operational part of step 3. It isn't just the prayer, it's the point that I have to start to believe something, that if I remain in control of my own life, trying to get what I want done, it's going to create lots of drinking triggers, and back we go. So step 3, therefore, involves accepting that if we aren't on the path of letting a higher power care for us, and the how of that comes later, by the way, in subsequent steps, then the question must be asked, who's caring for us now? And this is the point. If a higher power is not caring for me, then who's caring for me? Oh, it's me. The suggested answer is ourselves. Good, bad intentions don't matter. It's about who is running the show. We could be a lovely person, a benevolent person, or an absolute, awful person. It doesn't matter. It's about who's on, good or bad intentions, doesn't matter. Who's driving? When we do, we are more likely to become restless, irritable, discontented, and the mental side of our disease once again gets a chance to tell us, hey, you can drink like a normal person. This is the whole system. This is why we need to look at it, in particular as people with the disease of alcoholism. Let's keep going. Is he, the actor, it's from 61, page 61, not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players? This is like a barrister in a courtroom, isn't it? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in the best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? That's quite lofty language. And, when I have to unpack this, or choose to unpack this, today, for the people I talk about with the big book, I usually say something like, is he, the actor, not really all about himself, even when he's trying to be kind? Isn't he dreaming when he thinks he can be happy if he only controls everything? Isn't the rest of the cast onto him? And don't they want to block him from getting what he wants? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Now, whichever way you put it, it comes down to something that is mentioned quite soon thereafter in the big book. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like and then the writers lurch into a series of 1930s examples of selfish types of people, stereotypes in many cases that probably make less sense today. Today, these people, these examples, could be, follower-obsessed influencers, self-absorbed reality show contestants, or corporate narcissists. We could, create quite a long list. The point is, the big book gives us a number of examples of self-centered people and ends with the alcoholic. And this is, of course, a really important point that the big book is now making. This is not about alcoholism anymore. It's about egoism. It's about our solution, not our problem. And I'll unpack that a bit more in a moment. The book goes on. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Who's the our? It's no longer alcoholics, it's everyone. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Think about those problems compared to what we learnt at step 1 about alcoholism. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. That's from page 62. And why I got you to think about those problems is this. The writers have stopped talking about alcoholism, a very specific problem for a small few. They've moved on to looking at the opposite, the complete opposite of problems, the type of problems that impact every human being alive. The spiritual malady we read about at step 4. Now, I'm making a very distinct point about what the big book is saying here. Time and time again, I've met people in AA who suggest that alcoholism, what we talk about at step 1, includes the spiritual malady, but the big book is saying that is not the case. The spiritual malady is a completely separate type of problem or problems for anyone on planet Earth. And that's why we get so many examples of other different types of people. The big book does, therefore, talk about why we need to look at it as people with the specific issue of alcoholism in a moment. So our troubles, the book continues, i.e. all humans, we think are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And the alcoholic, now it goes back to making, okay, let's stop talking about everyone. Let's go back to the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. Though he, she, they usually don't think so. To me, I feel that what the book is saying or talking about, I should say, is the alcoholic in addiction. I don't know if the book is talking about the alcoholic once they're in a complete recovery, because the book talks about in the promises, and there are more than one set of promises, how amazing our lives are and how normal we are, restoration to sanity, once we've had a spiritual awakening. So when we're talking about the alcoholic here, I do believe they're talking about the alcoholic, when they're out there having more than a few. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. So now you can see I'm now highlighting the care of God as we understood him in the heading there. Now we're looking at why God is the answer. And it goes back to, I feel the cycle of addiction again. We must or it kills us. We've already accepted step 1. We've already accepted the cycle of addiction includes us getting all worked up. And then that allows the allergy to be triggered by the mental obsession, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. So God makes it possible for us to break that cycle. That's what's really being said here. And very shortly after the previous reading comes this beautiful bit of writing about what our lives soon become once we make that decision, once we are all in, willing to go to any length. Established on such a footing, in other words, having set off on the steps, seeking a higher power, we become less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we become interested in seeing what we could contribute to life as we felt a new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his, her, their presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. Now, probably this section of the big book explains why 12-step recovery works. It never completely says it knows why it works, but the idea of, well, okay, if I become more fearless, if I become less triggered, if I become more interested in the things that will never trigger me but please me, if I become less self-interested and therefore less desirous of things that if I don't get them, I get resentful, all that stuff. If I become less of that, if I break that emotional thinking, values system and replace it with a better form of thinking, feeling, and valuing of things, well, maybe I'll get less and less restless, irritable, and discontented. And I start to experience the ease and comfort that comes from helping others, fearing things less, being useful, etc., etc., etc. Spirituality. And I think this slide is a way of trying to look at what Carl Jung believes and is captured in There Is a Solution. The idea of if we have a sudden transformation of the way we see and think and feel things, we lose the desire to drink. So, have a happy, sober day, and I hope I've given you something to really reflect on. We really do have to believe we're sick and our life is on the line. We really do have to believe that this whole higher power thing, this whole helping others thing, is the best shot we have. And the rest is just work and days and actions and handing it over and taking it back and, putting the steps into our life. But this idea of starting, it's not just belief. Belief is step 2, but step 3 is deciding. And once we decide, it's rolling up the shirt sleeves and getting stuck into the type of actions that create the type of thinking and feeling and values that make me a happy, sober member today. And I hope make you one too. Have a happy, sober day.